Hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of The Shadow Side with Safrianna. I'm Safrianna Luna, the Queer Spirit Guide, a licensed trauma therapist and coach, healer's healer, teacher, author, speaker, all of the things, whatever I feel like doing because I'm a manifesting generator. So, welcome back. Today I have a pretty intense topic to cover, but I think it is so important to cover. So, I was actually hanging out with some friends the other day, and we were just having deep talks as we do. And the bite model of authoritarian control came up. And a lot of this was kind of old news to me in a way, given that I have my history working in domestic violence shelters and, just also living and surviving through cult like control and a very prescriptive upbringing. So it was familiar to me, but I realized, oh my gosh, this is so not familiar to everyone. In fact, it's probably completely foreign to some people. So today I'm just going to be reviewing the bite model. And this comes from freedomofmind.com. And Freedom of Mind is a resource center. They have all kinds of resources on uh, authoritarian control and the bite model, influence continuum, different approaches for releasing oneself from a cult or helping others recover from a cult. But ultimately, that's kind of what they focus in on is what happens when there are cult-like mentalities or organizations, people, etc., that are exerting control over others. So I'm no stranger again to domestic violence, intimate partner violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, all of those things. But we don't often talk about or look at the more innocuous places that control can show up, such as in churches or in government or in spiritual groups or even hobby groups or shared interest groups where there just is an equal level of power and control. So, the bite model, I'll be sharing some details in the chat as well, so you can kind of follow along there. But again, I'm talking today about the bite model of authoritarian control that Freedom of Mind has on their website. You can go, you can download this, all the details for free. But if you want to hear someone talk about it, that's what I'm here to do. So, BITE stands for behavior, information, thought, and emotion. Now, what's really interesting to me as I just start there and orient there is that we have very little control ourselves over anything in this four quadrant uh, value system here: behaviors, emotions, thoughts, and information, except for our behavior and maybe the information that we take in. But as I've really seen over the last years, honestly, it's been years. There is, in many cases, a limitation to the kind of information that people can access. People literally have limited access to where they can get their news sources in certain cases, how they hear their news, how they receive information. Like all of that can be controlled and limited for people. But generally speaking, we do have the capacity to go and fact check and look up other information. But the only other thing on here is behavior that we have any form of control over because we decide how we act out in the world. But we can't necessarily control the thoughts or the emotions that immediately move through our systems. That's something that I would teach clients with the ABC model of CBT, A standing for antecedent, B for belief, and C for consequence. And essentially, that teaches that when there's an outside input or a situation occurs, the antecedent, the thing that happens before we respond, we have a belief or a thought that immediately runs through our head. We have no control over that. It's like instantaneous. This is the first thing that I think or believe about myself based on this external thing. And then the consequences come in the form of physical sensations, emotions, and our behavior. And our behavior, I would always teach, is the only thing on the chart that we have any control over. So, When we turn back to the bite model, when there's an external group, whether again it be a group or a single figure that is trying to control our behavior, then we're really getting into like it's not it is it even in my control anymore, right? Or is this a I'm behaving out of safety? So normally we're so in control of our behavior that we don't think we are, but when it comes to this authoritarian control, we can actually literally lose control of our behavior if we are not mindful and aware of what is happening. So, when an authoritative group or an authoritarian group, excuse me, wants to manipulate, they will attempt to dominate and regulate their members' behaviors. This might look like strict rules. It might look like a reward system. It might look like punishment. It might look like not giving individual autonomy, right? If you're a part of our group, you can't do that anymore. You can't think that anymore. So behavior control, and again, I really want to reiterate, this could be happening from an individual person, an organization, a government, a church, a thing, an MLM, any kind of structure that can create almost like a cult like or control mentality. So, behavior control can look like really trying to regulate somebody's physical space or their physical reality, determining when, where, and who they can spend time with. They can control clothing and hairstyles, regulate someone's diet, mess with people's sleep. They can require there to be permission for any decision to be made. And then we get into the really extreme categories, but behavior control can look like physical punishment. It can look like physical assault, sexual assault. It can look like all forms of really awful physical stuff. And we are more likely to be controlled if we are afraid we're going to come to imminent harm, of course. So it's just really important to point out like behavior control can come in the form of these little subtle things, like a family being like, oh no, as long as you live under my roof, you can't do that. Right. That could be applied to a cult like situation, but it also can escalate all the way up to that like actual physical harm. So it's important to understand that when we are under duress and there's that threat of physical harm coming our way, we are more likely to be controlled because we don't want to keep repeating the outcome we don't want of that harm. And so behavior control can come in all kinds of ways. I know a personal example for me when I was in a a group that unfortunately like I was being abused, and one of the leaders who was my partner at the time always was insistent that I have my hair and my clothing a certain way. And that kind of fed into the way the rest of the group looked. Like it was optics of how the group looked and the group cohesion and his preferences, but not necessarily mine. And that can be like a mid tier, right? When somebody is literally controlling how you dress, how you can keep your hair, right? So you can see some religions certainly push these sorts of things. There's no individual behavioral autonomy. It's this is what you do, this is how you do it. And if you are fully in the know, like you're fully aware, you're fully embodied, and that's what you want for yourself genuinely outside of coercive control, then cool. Yay. But often there is this level of coercive control. If you don't do this, you'll be kicked out of the group. If you don't do this, they're not going to like you. If you don't do this, there could be punishments or regulations, etc. So that's what behavior control looks like in the B of the bite model. So next is information. And again, just want to reiterate, it's really like I've had some beautiful conversations with people where I've come to understand they really just don't have access to the same information that I have. And that in that lack of information or the know-how of how to seek other information, it can be very easy to fall into believing the first thing you're told or the thing that your power figure, your authority figure, um, your spouse, whatever, whoever you see as kind of in charge above you, if you do, If they're the one sourcing your information, you're very likely to just kind of go with that and believe it. This is why I tell everyone to question everything, literally question everything. Question me, go fact check me, like look into things. But question everything, because there is such mass misinformation. And if you are ever relying on one single news source, you're not getting the whole picture. Like that much is definitely obvious. So it's important to not just get our information from news sources, but also from other people and their lived experiences, from conversations, from books, from all kinds of outlets, right? Not just one place. But information control, when it comes down to that authoritarian control, is really quite manipulative. It's manipulating and controlling the information flow through things like censorship and propaganda, and eliminating or eliminating people's access to outside perspectives other than this, one kind of little piece. So information control can look like deception, right? Deliberately, intentionally withholding information from people, distorting that information, and trying to lie to people. And I know one of the biggest things that most Americans agree on right now is that there is a lot of misinformation swirling in the world. And if you consider yourself on a quote unquote side, you probably think that the other side is distorting the information too. So that's probably true. Go check, go look, go double, triple, dig deeper, check the biases of your source, and like really dig in, because again, if you are just taking things at face value, the first thing that you hear or see, there's probably some misinformation in it. But what ends up happening in cult like situations is that there's also this minimization of access or discouraging access of non controlled, non cult sources of information. So I'm just going to throw it out there. If you only get your news from a major news network, I'll just say Fox News, because that's where I know a lot of people that I've had conversations with recently are getting their information just from Fox News. But how does Fox News report? Who are their reporters? Do they bring in those outside diverse perspectives, and how do they showcase them? What do former members say about them? How do they handle when somebody disagrees? Like, these are the kinds of things that we want to really look at when it comes to our information. And again, go double, triple check in unrelated sources and other information. So what ends up happening when that access to outside information is discouraged is that we aren't as likely to seek that information, and then we can have the wool pulled over our eyes and not realize that something is happening that really is. So uh, there can also be distraction from the information, right? uh, Something happening right now, in our current political situation, political climate here in the world, is that there is always some new form of news coming out that is so much to keep up with, we can't possibly keep up with it. And we are too busy to investigate each new thing that comes out. And so that's the problem, too, uh, with this sort of level of information and information control, is it's very hard to keep up. And that is by design. So it's important to kind of find our experts, our people that we know are looking very closely at one particular thing, and to maybe check in with them, or to figure out where they source their information, so that we can keep some breadth in our perspectives. That's what we need right now. We need more breadth in our perspectives. And again, the bite model kind of showcases like an escalation, right? There's these little things. So the deception and the minimizing or discouraging non-cult sources of information are bad, but it gets kind of worse when there is compartmentalization of information. So I'm not going to make this information freely accessible to people. That's major control. And then even more control is like encouraging spying on other people in an organization to see what information they have and make sure that they are not spreading things that the cult like authoritarian figure doesn't want them to know. So it's rough, but this really is happening in the world right now. Where I mean, just take for example, keyloggers perhaps being put on federal computers. On one hand, you might think, "Yay!" Making sure that there's no waste or people are doing their jobs. But on the same token, if they are sharing, like, hey, are you okay with what's happening over here in this department? Uh, you know, this seems really unethical. And there's conversations like that taking place where people are trying to stand up or do the right thing and they're trying to nip that in the bud. Like, this is, again, that kind of control of information. And then, of course, there's cult generated information, propaganda, misquoting things out of context, having deliberate sources that are meant to fear monger or hate monger or whatever awful thing they want to do to point fingers at others. And then, last but not least, unethical use of confession. So that can be like manipulating someone's shadows, using their information against them to blackmail, to control, to even potentially like withhold forgiveness or even implant false memories. So, information control can show up in all kinds of ways, but ultimately limits how we access information. So, the next one is thought control. So, first of all, many of us don't even know how to think on a day to day basis because we've been told all kinds of things. We've been told to be this way, do this thing. This is what you believe. This is how we believe in this family. This is what we believe at this organization. This is what we believe in our church, whatever it may be. So a lot of us are already kind of questioning our own internal thought landscape. And in authoritarian control, uh, those who want to manipulate really focus on psychological techniques to help shape the beliefs, the attitudes, the critical thinking, just the individuality in the community of its members. And they really want conformity, right? In order for an authoritarian to get their way, there has to be conformity. There has to be this like, okay, I'll do that. And that is the ugly reality, right? They wouldn't be able to have this kind of control if every individual said, "No, that's not right. I'm not doing that." But many of us have already been primed due to the systemic stuff around us to just kind of bow our heads to the authority figure and just sort of go with it because we're afraid to be abandoned, we're afraid to be left behind. So, in authoritarian control, thought control can look like basically forcing a doctrine as truth, right? Like, this is the truth. Very black and white thinking, very good versus evil, and very us versus them. Now, if you know me, you know I have talked about the us versus them a billion times because it's the number one thing I think if we could do away with, a lot of our problems would be solved. But if you are being taught to think that other people are less than you, less worthy, less valuable, less important, whatever, uh, because your group or your community, your church, your government, your whatever needs to stay on a pedestal, that's potentially authoritarian control, probably authoritarian control, honestly, because putting people in boxes and treating them like, oh, those are the good ones and those are the bad ones is super reductionist and not healthy at all. And that's just super problematic. So we have to do away with that. And that's the minimum level of thought control. So again, I just said, like, most of us don't know how to think for ourselves. Look around at how many people play the us versus them, the good versus evil game. It is an overwhelming amount of people. So then layer on top of that things like loaded language and I think they're called thought eliminating cliches, where you just kind of, it is what it is. And then there's no arguing that. So you just kind of stop talking. When someone's like, oh, this is just how I feel. If you have a problem with it, you can go over there or whatever. Like there's no room for dialogue. That can absolutely be a form of this thought and or behavior control. And this is where we see buzzwords, right now. Woke is like super under attack. uh and what is what's the actual history of woke? What's the actual story behind it? What did it actually mean to its original people before it was twisted by groups trying to control the narrative? So thought control can look like, there's certain thoughts or certain ways of being that are good and proper, and there are others that are not. Uh, Absolutely. In cults, there can be hypnotic techniques, there can be memory manipulation, and all kinds of things. That's, again, the more extreme end of the spectrum. But the big things that I think most of us know about or know to look for are the thought stopping techniques that shut down our willingness to look at reality, because there's like toxic positivity, or spiritual bypassing. So it's like, oh, don't think that, just go meditate, or no, 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 just pray that away. Or my favorite in one of the situations I was in that was very cult like was just, oh, just shape shift your problems away magically. Like you don't have to look at that. And when we don't look at the shadow, when we don't confront the unpleasant, the uncomfortable, the harmful, it perpetuates the harm. It keeps the cycle going. So it's so important that we do lean in. So when there's control and we're being fed a new map of reality that's not ours, but it's like, if you don't do this, if you don't believe this way, you're going to be abandoned, you're going to be alone, you're going to be incorrect, you're going to be sinful, you are going to displease your elders, right? Whatever story is being told, we're more likely to latch on because of our fear, because of our shame. And one of my favorites, I say that sarcastically, in thought control is the limiting or forbidding of having questions about a leader, a doctrine, or a policy. And I think that we're really, really seeing this in the United States right now, because no matter what side of the political aisle you are on or not on, there are some very questionable things happening right now. But even questioning that is being attacked. And that is authoritarian control, right? When we can't ask a question, why are you doing things that way? Or is this what you meant to do? Or do you understand the impact of this? When our ability to question something is eliminated, that is control. So, yeah. And then, most importantly, perhaps, is if there is this labeling of others as illegitimate, evil, not useful, unworthy, dirty, wrong, bad, etc. That is thought control. There is no human that is illegal. There is no human that is bad or wrong simply for existing. There is no one that can actually determine someone else's individual internal truth, right? And I could see some people arguing, well, if this is how I believe, and no one can stop me from believing that way. But if your belief is trying to force others to conform to your way of believing, you're now also participating in trying to be controlling over others, right? So our internal beliefs, our lifestyles, our choices should not impact other people or make them conform to a certain way of being. Should be promoting autonomy, not one size fits all. All right. So finally, in the bite model of authoritarian control, it's a mouthful, is emotion. And it's so easy to manipulate people's emotions because we are emotional creatures, and we're not taught to feel our feelings and express them and have healthy environments to share and all of that. In fact, we're taught to shut them down and to swallow them down and to put them away. So, manipulative organizations, governments, figures, etc., can really foster a sense of dependency and a sense of loyalty in their people through things like love bombing, guilt, and fear based indoctrination. So, I don't love this. I don't love this, but we have to talk about it because, again, it's everywhere. So, manipulating and narrowing our range of feelings. So, what this means is certain emotions are sometimes deemed as selfish or wrong or bad. So, I'd be very curious how many people listening have been told, like, stop crying. No, no. Like, wipe those tears, right? You shouldn't feel that way. Certain emotions were shut down for many of us as we were growing up. And so we blocked our emotions. We were sent to time out. We were spanked. We were yelled at. We were ridiculed. We were neglected, something like that, leading us to just block the feelings because we don't want the rejection. And so, in situations, cult like situations, they will narrow and eliminate people's feelings. Oh, you're not allowed to feel that way. Nope, that's not a way we feel around here. You're doing it wrong if you feel sad. You just need to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and do this. So there can be emotion stopping techniques that are taught to block people's feelings of anger or doubt or fear or whatever might be coming up. And things can be twisted, turned around so that people believe problems are always their fault, that they are doing something wrong, that it's not the leader, it's not the group, it's the individual. And I have personally been in several situations where the leader of the group could not be questioned, or there were multiple people even that would bring up issues, but the leader would just pass it off as that's a you problem, even though there were multiple people saying this isn't working for me. So if a leader is not able to listen to and be with other people's emotions, if there's a need to shut down or limit or control, it's potentially cult like, right? It is potentially authoritarian control. And when somebody is always like, "Ugh, well, it is just me. This follows me wherever I go. No matter what I do, nothing's good enough," right? They're going to be more susceptible, again, to just kind of bowing the head to the authority figure, trying to do whatever they can do to fit in. And along with emotional control can be promoting that sense of unworthiness based off of some of the following kinds of things. You're not living up to your potential, right? Oh, well, if you were just born into a different family, then things would be different for you. Or, well, if you didn't do that thing in your past, maybe this wouldn't be happening now. You just hang out with the wrong people. Oh, you just don't have your head on straight. So, historical, social, affiliative, family, past identity, etc., guilt can be layered on to create a sense of unworthiness, otherness. You're not going to make it if you don't conform to all of these things and be in this one size fits all little box over here. And we can end up really fearing the outside world when we're told things like this because we think if we don't fit in with the safe group that the outside world is going to get us, right? And that goes back to that us versus them narrative, that when we are not thinking independently, we're not questioning things, we can really easily fall into that us versus them trap and believe, right, that everyone else is the enemy and it's just my safe group that I can be cared for in. So there's so many ways this can show up, but I've personally experienced that leader kind of pushing off responsibility. I've experienced love bombing and praise in one breath, and then being ridiculed and told all the things I'm doing wrong in the next. And that can be a really subtle way. I know that doesn't seem subtle, right? Like love bombing and then guilting. But for people who grew up in trauma, that roller coaster ride is perfectly normal. And so it's easy to kind of fall into it with a group or an individual. So then I can't end this without just talking about the more extreme versions in cults where there is like this: if you leave the group, you will not find happiness. If you leave this group, there will be terrible consequences. If you leave this group, you will be rejected by everyone you know. There's no reason for you to leave. This is the place. This is the way. Uh, that really extreme, almost phobic indoctrination. Those techniques look like creating irrational fears for people so that if they leave the group, they really may believe they will be alone. They will have no one. And I know so many people recovering from religious, capitalistic, and even ideals based cult like groups where they really did believe if they left the group, they would never find happiness or fulfillment again. Right. And then you layer in things like hell, demonic possession, disease, all kinds of things, uh, then it's going to be even harder to leave because of all of the fear. So, all of this to say, my friends, that if someone is trying to make you feel afraid, if someone is trying to make you other people, if someone is trying to make you conform, if they're trying to tell you how to look, how to act, how to think, how to be, how to vote, how to show up in the world, if people are telling you that you are going to go to hell if you do something that they don't want you to do. All of these are examples of authoritarian control. And the bite model, again, goes into all of this. I shared a lot of the major signs and symptoms today, again, just to hopefully bring some awareness that there are all these ways that this kind of control can show up. And regardless of where and how, again, I've experienced some of these things in personal relationships. I've experienced them in my upbringing. I've experienced them in church and spiritual community environments. I've experienced them in social groups where we were joined for a mutual purpose. The cult like piece, the scary, get the heck out of their piece, is if there is the control. If you're all coming together in love and light and you're having a good time and you're happy to be there, and if you don't show up, no one's going to come knocking on your door wondering where the heck you are and why you're not showing up and doing the things that you're required to do to be a part of the group, you're probably okay. But if you are finding yourself literally experiencing fear or shame for not participating the way that you've been expected to, then you very well may have some authoritarian control on your hands and it may be time to exit. Of course, there's all kinds of resources out there for you if you are looking to get out of a negative situation. The freedomofmind.com is one such potential. And then, of course, if it's domestic violence or human trafficking related, there are all kinds of organizations out there if you search domestic violence online that can help with that. And I have resources on my website as well. So, heavy topic. Um, and I just invite you to take some breaths here, right? Like, whether you've been in a situation like this, you're reflecting and realize you may be in a situation like this, or you want to avoid it in the future. You have the authority within you. You are your figure. You are your leader. Look to yourself, look to your highest self, look to, the messages that your soul wants you to hear, that your heart wants you to hear. You don't have to look outside of you for every single answer. And if someone outside of you, again, whether church, individual, political figure, whatever, if anyone is telling you this is how to think, be, feel, it's a sign to run, that it is not for you because you are a beautiful, unique individual and no one can prescribe a way to be for you. So I hope that no matter your circumstances, whether you have been, are in, or know someone in a situation with almost like a cult like mentality or cult-like behaviors where there's control, where there's fear, where there's shame being spread like wildfire, there are supports for you out there. I see you. I believe in you. I love you. I know you can get out. I myself have gotten out of many negative situations, so I know how challenging it can be, but also how empowering and necessary it is. So, don't hesitate to reach out if you need more information. Head over to freedomofmind.com if you want to read more about the bite model. It's under their resources. And if there are other topics that you want me to cover, whether it be something specific from this, sharing more examples, or going in depth on something else, please let me know. I'm here to serve and to just really keep sharing. This the shit that we don't want to talk about, right? Like no one wants to talk about authoritarian control, but because we don't talk about it, it pervades and it's still happening. And so many hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people are under coercive types of control in so many different situations. And I believe if we were just able to talk about it more and not be so afraid to dive into the shadows, that these problems would begin to lift. We would begin to enter a new era where this kind of control doesn't work anymore because individuals are empowered, self loving, and really standing in their authentic truth. So be that light in the world, shine your authentic truth, and know that that in of itself makes a tremendous impact. All right. Until next time, my friends, I'm Safrianna Luna. I love you. I'm cheering you on, and I will be back with a special guest next week. Bye for now.